I'd like to know how you describe the conflict between Israel and Gaza at the moment. How do you actually describe what's going on?
I think that Israel's actions are manifestly unjust and unjustified. I think that it is a conflict that must be brought to an end. I think it's brutal and horrific what's happening to the people in Gaza who really have no choice and nowhere else to go. I think that the Hamas attack that started all of this, what was it, 8 months ago or so now, was a horrific event in itself. But the response that we have seen from that has been totally disproportionate, I think the action that's being taken to hold those accountable for that, is the right stuff. I think the International Criminal Court and so on looking at it, I think is really important.
Would you use the word genocide?
I mean, genocide, the problem with a politician using the term genocide is that when it comes to those ICJ, appearances, there's a particular meaning of that. And there are people whose job it is to determine whether or not it's genocide or not. And so it certainly is horrific, unjustified. And if the legal proceedings determined that it was genocide, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Speaking of the legal proceedings, International Criminal Court wants to bring charges against Hamas for war crimes and wants to bring charges against Netanyahu for crimes against humanity. Are you comfortable with both of those? Are you comfortable with Benjamin Netanyahu being charged with crimes against humanity?
Those are ultimately, yes, but those are ultimately matters that I don't make those decisions. That's a legal process.
But yes, you're comfortable. Like if Benjamin Netanyahu, look, I'm not asking you about Hamas because we all know Hamas committed an atrocity, a war crime. Like I think that goes without saying. But the one that doesn't go without saying for many people is the Benjamin Netanyahu one. So that's why I'm asking you about that. You say you're comfortable if he was brought up on charges of crimes against humanity, you'd be comfortable with that.
Well, yes, because I mean, when you're bombing citizens, innocent civilians who have nowhere else to go, then any leader who knowingly does that should be held accountable for that.
And what should New Zealand do ultimately right now? What stance should we take? What action should we take, if any, as to what's going on over there?
I think New Zealand's been a bit slow to the party. And, I think the stance that we're taking now is better than it was 6 months ago as a country. And one of the things that I got really frustrated with after the election was as we saw that unfold and we saw it getting worse, I wasn't able to really say anything as the caretaker prime minister without the agreement of the incoming government. And in the end, I just thought they were far too slow in actually saying anything meaningful on it. So I ended up making a statement as the leader of the Labour Party, which was a little bit constitutionally tricky because I was still the prime minister at the time, but wasn't speaking as prime minister. But I do think New Zealand should have a strong independent voice in this. I think, an independent foreign policy means exactly that. It means that we speak from our values. And when I look at what's happening in Gaza, that's not consistent with New Zealand's values and the values that we've long held in the world. I think that we've seen more recent signals out of the government that they're willing to say something and do something, but it still feels like they're waiting for the rest of the world to join them before they actually show any leadership on the matter. And I think that, what's the point of saying we've got an independent foreign policy if we're not willing to lead?
Chippy?
So, one thing I'd love to know, Helen Clark kicked out the Israeli ambassador when Mossad agents were caught stealing identities of dead children and disabled people. What is the yardstick for getting rid of an ambassador, sending him packing? I mean, we've got Russia invading Ukraine and we've got what's going on in Gaza at the moment. Those are ones that have had pretty consistent calls to get rid of them back to their own countries.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's a belief in the power of diplomacy that means that you don't expel ambassadors right, left and centre. Because how will you ever get to peace? How will you ever get to talking, to bring an end to the conflict if there's no one left to do the talking? And so that to me is the kind of the thing that we always have to keep in mind. We have an independent foreign policy. We should be conveying regularly to the representatives of those countries, Israel and Russia and the two examples that you just mentioned, what New Zealand's position is. But we would have no means of conveying that if we didn't have ambassadors here who we could call in and convey that message to. So, and that becomes an interesting challenge around the peace process too, for example. So if you take Hamas, and let's just think about Ireland and Northern Ireland and the IRA, if the British people had simply said, we're not going to communicate in any way with anyone who's been involved with the IRA, then the Good Friday Agreement never would have been reached. And, you know, fundamentally, if we want to bring peace, at some point, people have to talk.
I'm just smirking because I'm just thinking about the Russian ambassador picking up the phone and speaking to Putin, going, "These Kiwis are getting a bit pissy with me." I don't know how well it would go down.